Now, if you were to ask me who my least favorite type of person is, you'd probably expect me to say something like Genshin fans, politicians, Whopper, but it's actually none of these. It's actually those heathens that put video game spoilers in their video thumbnails or Reddit posts with no spoiler warning. Now before I go off into a rant, which I tend to do, let's first establish what a spoiler actually is. Now according to the Google definition, a spoiler is a description of an important plot development which, if previously known, may reduce surprise or suspense for a first-time reader. Now going beyond this simple definition, I think we can all agree that stuff from the early game doesn't count as a spoiler, since it's where most of the footage for trailers and reviews prior to the game's release come from. And I also think it's not necessarily a spoiler if what's being spoiled is one of the main draws to the game's story. So for example in Three Houses, the game having a time skip isn't a spoiler since it was already outright shown in one of the trailers, and was probably meant to be one of the game's main selling points. Well, now that we've established what a spoiler is, let's talk about why they suck. Now as you might imagine, video games with well-written stories are pretty damn long. These games can range from 30 to 70 hours in length. These games aren't just long for the sake of being long, but rather, it's long because it spends time developing and fleshing out its world and characters. This is what we pseudo-intellectuals refer to as world building. In order for us to care about a character dying, we have to actually grow attached to them. And games like Fire Emblem do this really well, with stuff like the support conversations, which by themselves don't add much value, but when combined with other little interactions spread throughout the game, they can add a lot of attachment to a completely fictional character who would otherwise just be considered a bunch of well-structured pixels on a screen. Now that we have this connection to a PNG set in stone, anything that happens to them as the story progresses will only have more of an impact on the player, which is precisely what you want from a video game story. But being told major spoilers for characters that you don't even know obviously won't have its desired effect, and will just end up removing the shock value from when the big twist actually occurs. To summarize everything I've said for all of you guys who've been robbed of your attention spans, middle-aged dads who watch football don't just look at the match's final score and then immediately start being their wife when they see that their team lost, but rather, they sit through a 90-minute match of nothing happening, then they see their team lose in penalties, and then they beat their wife. Now theoreticals aside, it's important to note that not only do spoilers ruin your first run through a game, but they also affect the game's replay value as a whole, as you'd have already known the main plot threads on your initial playthrough, and thus you would be able to spot all the foreshadowing and hints towards the main twists on your first playthrough rather than on a repeat playthrough like they originally intended, which gives you less of a reason to play through the game again and hurts the game's replay value as a whole, which of course affects the overall game experience. Now of course nothing I'm saying would actually matter if you just don't look at the spoilers, right? Yeah, well, it's not that easy. We have to deal with all the fans of the games are in constant competition with each other for who can make the most unfunny, unoriginal, and unintellectual jokes in the fandom. And when you confront them about the fact that they're just blatantly spoiling games that aren't even released in English yet, they just give an answer which essentially just amounts to, I don't care. So let me show you how to correctly deal with these people. There we go. That should do it. Anyway, with all that said and done, I'll see you guys later.